Right, today, so we're joined here with Sam Khan, a CIO, entrepreneur, and innovator with over 2 decades of IT, from scaling enterprise tech to powering AI-driven solutions, and even launching a fashion line. Sam brings a unique blend of strategy, creativity, and cutting-edge innovation. So let's dive in on today's episode of Heartbeat Tactical Insights for CIOs. Sam, welcome.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for having me this afternoon. I appreciate it.
So your career has taken us through several roles in higher education. What would you say are your defining moments and what has shaped your path to becoming a CIO at Dynamic Campus?
I think my career, for the most part, has been shaped by a passion for technology, obviously, right? And especially for education and the impact technology has on education. That was definitely a driving force in my world from a young age, from the time I graduated from a university. And quickly moving from software engineer hat to IP leadership roles and ultimately to CIO. And definitely, I can think of so many stories from my journey where listening to the parents and students continuously, understanding their problem and empathizing and see how you can solve those problems was a driving factor. And to this very day, that is something that you continuously think and collect and try to be of service from that sense. It has been an amazing journey. And then as technology tends to change rapidly from a CIO lens, from a CIO standpoint, you have to constantly, or from a technology leadership standpoint, you have to keep up with the trends, keep up with the real world scenarios. And how, again, I love to use even though it sounds like cliche, the word empathy, really aligning yourself with the problem and see how you can be a problem solver. And to me, that plays a big part in my life.
Thank you for that insight. So speaking of stories, can you share a time when technology completely disrupted your industry or role? And how did you adapt and what did you learn from that experience?
But one of the tough lessons, if I understand your question or the discussion points correctly, one of the things that we have to keep in mind that technology alone doesn't solve problems, right? So when you see something that's destructive, when you see something that needs action, technology plays a role of enabler. However, understanding the people and process plays the larger role. So people and processes must evolve with it. From a CIO lens, we must ensure stakeholder alignment before pushing forward with major initiatives, major cultural shifts. So I see what I bring to the table as a service and slash enabler. However, it is the people and process and culture that you need to focus in on before introducing technology, making that a factor, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And so when you look at the people that have been involved in your roles, have you seen there being a shift from a specific training set, people that were maybe computer science, more of a traditional I background, to maybe that opening up the aperture of who's getting involved in the teams that you're working with?
Give me a little more context on that. I just want to think through that for a
So
second.
one of the companies I worked with, Blue Wolf, before they were acquired by IBM, they made it a real point to look beyond the traditional IT background of computer science and traditional skill sets like math and hard sciences to looking at those who maybe could learn the skill sets of a platform like Salesforce or different SaaS-based platforms, but understood how to connect with people. They understood how to ask questions of what problems are you trying to solve versus getting into the deep technical conversations. Have you seen types of trends in your world?
For me, from a technology leadership standpoint, I believe one of the fundamental leadership shifts for me personally was realizing that digital transformation isn't just about technology. Again, going back to that earlier conversation about culture and change management and aligning innovation with the institutional goals, whatever that may be. So really understanding the culture, understanding that the team that you're trying to put together or team that you're working with has the right attitude. Because end of the day, you may know everything, you may have the right credentials, doesn't mean that you can deliver, right? To me, as a tech leader, those are some of I purely call it the service elements or the attributes from a service lens That's what I look at. Do we have the heart of service, right? End of the day, if you're within a domain, in my case, I've been in the higher ed space forever, because I'm very passionate about the higher education sector and or that vertical, because I believe that education is an integral part and should be an integral part of our evolving as humans and our gaining knowledge and wisdom and things of that nature in any segment or personas or vertical that we can think of. In that space, to me, I see myself as an educator rather than a technologist or a software engineer, which is all great to have that. However, I think bringing the right attitude to, from an attribute standpoint, is key that can play towards cultural shifts or changes.
Fantastic. I appreciate that insight. So through trial and error, every CIO has had tough lessons. What's one hard-earned insight that could help CIOs avoid costly mistakes from your point of view?
The thing with that is there's nothing perfect, right? Everything is a balancing act. So you understanding that at the ground level, that it's a balancing act is a key piece to the puzzle. If you are a person who thinks about, hey, I'm going to perfect this technology before delivering it, I can guarantee you that even after a decade, you won't release the technology. That is for sure. How do you really balance that is the key, right? Understanding the risk factors is an important piece. What are the risks? Some risks you may not be able to resolve it as part of your product launch or as part of the launch of a given initiative for your given institution. However, being aware of that risk is the key piece, right? And so you are being proactive in the assessment of the risks that's involved. Making it a collective, making it a shared governance is where, because I'm a firm believer of peer reviews. There's trying to, what is that saying? If you do it alone, you can get things done faster, but if you want to go long term, if you want the longevity of it, bring people together, look at peer review, look at sustainability, look at things that you're implementing. Is it at scale? Those are the kind of things that you got to look at. If this day and age, especially if you're delivering technology and if it's not at scale, then you've already failed because you cannot keep up with the trends. But that's what's coming to my mind as far as how do you really, is that a collective? Is that how much of a shared governance is it? Back in the days, it's not a top down approach. It's not a bottom up approach. It's just that collective. That's that brain power, right? That brain trust that come in and really put together a strategy, a roadmap, a milestone, journey mapping your processes, and really bring it all together. I think that is, if we, at the fundamental level, if we have that understanding, I think we will have solutions at scale, in my opinion.
And I think that's a keen insight and a good segue into the next question, which is CIOs are being tasked with not only scaling existing infrastructure technology, but there's new innovation that's coming down the pipeline, which seems almost daily. And so when you look at things like AI, when you look at some of the new environments that the CIOs are now being made responsible for, they're being challenged from an operational point of view. What do you see evolving? I had written down here over the next few years, but over the next few months, I think it might be a better horizon from a time point of view. How would you answer that?
I can use AI as an example. Let me just bring that to the top. So everyone is going, it's sometimes I think of it as such, again, the word cliche, it's with a chicken with a head cut off running. People are just running around thinking, especially when it comes to education, the policy piece of it, right? Where do you really draw the line if students can go and write up using an AI solution right to their essay or their compositions or whatever it may be, faculty pulling up information to create AI, administrators pulling up AI to create outputs. How does it all play into the policy piece of it? Who owns what? The security element of it, right? The business intelligence of it. How do we bring it all together? And like you said, every day with some of the changes that happened last week or 2 weeks ago with the competition between OpenAI and DeepSeek and whatnot, how do we look at it? One of the things that we have done within Dynamic Campus is at one of our institutions is, again, that shared governance model. Do we have the right representation, not only from the academic side of the house, but also the administrative side and also the student side? Do we have representation from the student body in regards to putting together this strategy, this roadmap, this AI policy? And based on that, based on these personas, then let us build use cases, right? What would be the right use case for students? What are the use cases for administrators and what's for faculty? And based on that, you build that AI engine, that use case for a given institution, which is again, keeping it at that agnostic level so that it is adaptable, it's plug and play, it is easy to implement, because once you have that use case defined at that policy level, then you have a clear idea. So that's how I'm using AI as an example where these trends are happening. How do you keep up with the trends? That's one. Then how do you deliver that trend? How do you make that trend available to the common users or any types of users? How do you make that happen? And that's where we're at right now from a DC lens. So that's what we're doing, where we are bringing people together to have a policy discussion. And then once you have that defined, then you layer the use cases on top of it, and then you build the AI engine that needs, because you're at a point where AI can deliver both qualitative measures and quantitative measures, right? So how do you bring it all together? So that's to give you an example of how we're dealing from my standpoint, how I'm dealing with new trends, in this case, AI.
I think what you said is so key, which is the governance and then how that ties to use cases, and focusing on business outcomes is a great way to set your North Star as you're going down this journey. Because I've seen, and maybe you have as well, that digital transformation, or this term digital transformation, they often fail or they stall. And what would you say separates the successful ones, and how can other CIOs define and measure success? Because it's not a cut and dry where it's a 100% achievement of that goal. What would you recommend?
So my recommendation to, even this is also to myself, right? You have to recalibrate yourself when you say these things, is keep in mind that, again, that keyword that I used earlier is understanding that everything you do is a balancing act. You making sure you have the North Star is key. Make sure you have a North Star. Now, getting to that North Star is your goal. So in order to get to that North Star, how do you balance everything on the way as part of your journey? So that is what we forget. We always want to run to the North Star, but how do I can use the product development lifecycle as an example from a PDLC. When you are doing a product development, you're part of the PDLC. Where does software development lifecycle come in? How do you embed SDLC into your product development lifecycle? Some people just think about software development lifecycle, but completely forget that the umbrella part is the PDLC, the product development lifecycle. So that's your North Star. You have a product vision. How do you then get to it? So for the CIOs out there, what I would say is understanding that it's a balancing act, understanding a North Star. Then how do you, as part of this journey, how do you create that milestones? You create those milestones by understanding the journey map, right? So you have your baseline, then you have your KPI. So if you really don't understand your baseline as part of the journey, then you have missed your KPI. Because you can all say, this is our key performance indicator, this is the goal in 3 years I want to get to. But if you really don't have a good grasp of your baseline, then it's a non-starter to me at that point. So where do you stand? How do you measure the current outcome is a key piece to understanding the journey, the risk involved from every angle, from a capacity resource risk, from a budget resource, budget risk, you name it. All of those segments would play into it. And it's like a puzzle, it'll all fall into place. So I think the way you measure outcome, to answer your question, is that some of these points are made, because everything is an outcome, right? Everything needs to be measured in that sense. Understanding the current trajectory, where you're at, what is the goal, even if it's a product development to process changes to policy changes. Right now, we're doing a complete policy revamp at one of our sites. Some of the policies have been 20 years old.
A lot has changed in 20 years.
Right. So that's because the policy was not at scale, right? You have a policy that was written that was not at scale. So it's stagnant and it just stays there. For the current CIOs, including myself and future CIOs and CTOs and chief product officers out there, those are the suggestions or recommendations I would make. Know that it's a balancing act. Always try your best to understand the North Star. What is that you're trying to get to? And understand proactively the risks that are involved. As long as you have a gauge on the risks involved, you are understanding the strength and weaknesses, right? So your risks could be categorized as your weaknesses in that sense, right? So understanding that is key, that then you can use that as a leverage to really propel and make things happen. So that, again, there are so much we can go deeper into this, but at the high level, that's what I would share with my fellow C-suite folks out there.
That's great. Thank you. What is one trend you believe your peers are overlooking? And another way of putting it is, what is flying under the radar from your point of view? Right now, anything AI is on fire. Everyone is trying to implement any version of AI and thinking of how it's going to completely disrupt all forms of business. In fact, some of the things that AI is being put to use for really should not be applied. You don't need AI in your fridge, for example, as a use case, but there's so many other innovations and development that's taking place that is really not being given the same amount of highlight or recognition. Is there anything you're seeing that you would like to highlight or say, hey, I learned about this and it's actually something that could really have a positive impact on our industry?
I think we have a tendency, no matter what vertical you take, let it be education or supply chain or finance or health, from a technology lens, we always talk about digitization. We talk about automation, right? And one of the things people love talking about digitization and automation. And one of the things that I try to promote intentionally is the workflow. That is something that goes under the radar, right? The workflow piece of it. How do you do your workflow between agencies? Do you have an agency from an accountability lens standpoint that understands the workflow between departments and offices? We constantly talk about silos. And if you like it or not, no matter what measure you put in place, silos are an integral part of human nature, and it is going to be there. But how do you balance that? See, that's a question. You can never get rid of silos because that's human nature. But how do you balance it? I believe is simply a cultural shift from a workflow lens. And technologies can help. There are technologies that can help resolve that problem when it comes to. That's when automation and digitization would work hand in hand, when you have a workflow in it, when you have a process defined. And that is something I've noticed, no matter how advanced a given technology is, if you don't have the right data set available to you, AI is garbage. If you take some of the LLMs, older, smaller LLMs, they have their cutoff period was a year ago or 2 years ago. So your accuracy on that data insight is out the door right away from the get-go. So how do you, I think, to get to all of that, having that clear strategically aligned workflow is a key piece that I've learned, especially within higher education, that is lacking in every school that I've gone to pretty much. How do you create that agency and bring these, not only the technology, but different from a shared governance lens, how you bring it all together? I hope I answered that question, but that is what I'm sensing.
You did, thank you. And as you're sharing your thoughts, something that came to mind, and I'm just going to jump in and offer my opinion here. I think a major trend that we're overlooking is the humanness of things. Meaning, if you have a question or if there's a hard conversation that needs to be had, or even a point of celebration, put your phone down, turn off your computer, go physically meet the person. If you're in the same office or if you are in the same city, meet the person face to face and bring back the humanness of things. And Zoom calls and what we're doing is great because we're not in the same city, but I think there should be more of this authentic conversation versus relying on, I've got a bot that's going to be the new me to work anymore because I'm going to have this bot automate my life.
Yeah.
The value is on the exact opposite of it. And I think for those of us that can see that ability to go talk to someone face to face and connect with that person heart to heart is going to have the biggest impact. So that's just my opinion.
Mike, beautifully put. I'm glad you shared that. It's interesting you shared that, because recently I was at my barber and he was cutting my hair and we were talking, and he said, Sam, I'm making some life changes. I said, what kind of changes are you? I am now intentionally, I decided 2025 that I am going to use less of my phone. I said, that's awesome. So all of a sudden, my barber became an inspiration to me that evening. I'm like, tell me more. And he said, I want to intentionally, when I'm at work, I'm using this app to lock my phone so I don't touch it. I don't look at it. I don't use TikTok or Instagram or whatever social media. And then when I'm driving, I have an app that I share the same app. I don't look at the phone when I'm at the signal. I have a tendency when I am parked at my garage to sit in my car for the next 15 minutes looking at stuff that I don't really need to. And we all, I can relate to. He was sharing things that I could relate to. Like, Keith, you're saying everything that I do. And he served as an inspiration that evening where I'm like, I'm going to try and do the same. I'm going to try intentionally use less of my phone and be that human agent of interaction and really communicating, using that time intentionally to engage, especially with my children, with my family, your immediate family, your extended family, your friends, and even beyond that, right? Networking and all that good stuff. So I think I'm so glad that you brought up that point, Mike, and it's an important piece. Many of us are forgetting, especially the convenience factor you mentioned, where I have friends who are essentially using AI agents to control, even therapize their life, which we talk about the blue zones and all these various other things. And if we can learn anything from blue zones across the world, people who live beyond 79 or 80 years old, one of the things that they do constantly is social engagement. They intentionally do social engagement. So going in the evenings to have a cup of coffee or a glass of wine, to speak with and sit with their friends, have laughter. End of the day, it gives us a lot of enablers. However, that human touch and that social engagement is here to stay. And I hope people, again, that is on the North Star that we have to define within our lives for sure.
I heard this wonderful little trick. It's called the 10-10-10, which is with your kids, the first 10 minutes of your day or when you see them, you should give them 100% presence. The 10 minutes when you come home from work, it should be 100% presence.
Yeah.
The last 10 minutes at night, it should be 100% presence. And it seems so simple. But when we have to get acknowledgement from those who are in industries where I just think a barber would not be someone who'd be on their phone a lot.
Yeah.
But to hear wisdom from groups and people who we would not typically look to for technology advice, I think is really showing there's an absolute need for this. So with that in mind, a little bit of a different question. If you can go back in time and mentor your younger self, what's one piece of advice you'd make sure that you took to heart and actually took action on?
Great question. I think given the journey I've had, which thank God, but luckily I've had some amazing mentors. My granddad teaching me the attitude of service, my grandma teaching me the attitude of respect, to where I'm at especially from my dad and mom and things of that nature, and from my immediate family, is intentionally build relationships. That is so critical. And my inner selves, that is something that I would do. I have no regrets, but there are choices, right? You've made good and bad choices in life, which is all amazing. It's lessons learned. But that's one of the things that I would tell my younger self is just to focus on building relationships and that agency, which is so important. And then from a technology lens is really being able to communicate value of technology in business terms. That is something when I was a software engineer, I would assess. Sometimes I take stock, not sometimes, frequently I take stock of myself from speaking conversations. How do you take technology jargons into common business terms or common language and talk when you talk with your constituents? Is something that I would definitely teach myself if given that opportunity. Is really how do you communicate that value of technology in pure simple terms, and then intentionally staying ahead of the curve. So that's the other thing, because if I knew what I knew today, that's, we all say that, right? However, with your family, with your children, with your nephews, nieces, if you're mentoring somebody, the goal should be, hey, this is what I've learned. This is what I'll teach my younger self. Staying ahead of the curve. How do you do that? And so they are able to propel from there, right? Now you are feeding information to to the generation with a lot of potential. And so they don't have to start from scratch. In certain cases, you still do. However, I think learning, always staying ahead of the curve is an important piece. So those are some of the things that I would do.
Fantastic. So last question for you. Is there a book, a podcast, a video series that you would say has significantly impacted your thinking, or just something you really enjoy that you'd love to share?
I would definitely, there's a podcast that I like, the CIO Whisperers is something that I will highly recommend. And then, of course, video series is that and again, I can only talk to you from my own convictions on digital transformation, right? Which provides invaluable insights, especially on leadership and future trends and things of that nature. Everyone to me is a leader. The reason I say that is when you are making a given decision on a given day, you are practicing leadership. To me, that's how I define leadership. So when you as an individual is able to make decision for anything, you are practicing leadership. And I think the CIO Whisperers podcast and video series and stuff on digital transformation really cater a lot towards leadership. And I personally think that, and I do a lot of talk regarding leadership. I try to coach a lot and I try to mentor a lot of students in regards to that, is how to be a situational leader, right? Leadership is not monolithic. It is very compartmentalized. And how do you actively practice situational leadership? So it helps you to be agile. Agility is a big word. Again, from a cliche standpoint, we overuse those words, but being agile is important because it helps you to pivot and change and be very situational. So those are not only suggesting some, but I also wanted to add that layer of recommendation or advice or whatever you want to call that. But those are some of the things that I would recommend.
Fantastic. Sam, thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to share? Potentially anything that we've missed? Your insights have been fantastic. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Mike. Thanks for this opportunity. I hope this provides inspiration to listeners and create change agents, right? That's our goal. And I would also add that be curious at all times, because curious minds help us to be critical thinkers. When we are in our toddlers and young life, we would always ask the why, right? We are why this, why that. I would say even at this, as you get older, no matter what your age is, being curious as such is important. And I think that helps us to be critical thinkers. And that critical thinking is what solves problems. And I would pair that one more piece of recommendation to the folks who are listening.
Fantastic. Sam, thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you on and look forward to staying in touch.
Absolutely, Mike. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
You too.